we go, back to it.
Yes. Everything that's up here, you should be right. This is true. Well, if you want to, you're not counting you, but sure. I don't care. Whatever, that's fine. Keep in mind, though, I am recording this. It's going to be on YouTube later. So not only will you have all these delicious pictures in HD, but you also get the very wonderful sounds of my voice. So, anyhow, I'm going to go through what all those are. But first, let me show you a map real quick. It's one of my favorites. In fact, it actually was my background for a long time. Might still be. I'm not really sure. I haven't paid attention to it. And you cannot see it because of the sun. Well, that's the Earth at night. And it's a pretty cool map for a couple reasons. One is it pretty well shows how really unpopulated our planet is. You guys see what all the little dots are? They're lights representing large population centers. That's not to say that no one lives in the dark areas. Even the Sahara Desert has people living in it. But it does show levels of technology as well as population density. So there's a lot you can learn from maps. This is another map that we're not getting into right now. But I do want to talk to you guys about longitude and latitude really briefly. So, which is which? It says so right there for you. Latitude versus longitude. Latitude is fatitude. It's flat. This side. I've also heard it referred to as latitude, because it's like the rungs of a ladder climbing up the earth. These lines run east to west, okay? Meaning that they go east and west. You have lines of latitude that go east and west. With me so far? What's 0 degrees latitude called? The equator. Good. And more or less, it's a precise set of coordinates. It's the thickest part of the planet, right dead center, easy peasy. It's also the area that receives the most direct sunlight at any given time in the year. There's really only 2 seasons on the equator. And it's not like, like summer and spring or that kind of crap. It's wet and dry. You have the wet season, you have the dry season. Think, for instance, The Lion King. Ah, the vineyard, what's on the menu? That whole thing. Right? You with me? Bring it back. So, what are the 2 seasons between The Lion King? Well, remember how you got that nice variant? It's the circle of life song, everything's wonderful. And then you got the Nazi hyenas, and then suddenly everything's dead. Right? Everything's dry, there's no water, it's really sad. Everything catches fire. And then at the end of that, everything's perfect again, circle of life again, everything's great. That's the wet and dry season. Basically, wet season, there's life everywhere. It's crazy. It's blooming green, everything's great. And then you have the dry season where essentially you have wildfires breaking out because everything gets so brittle dry and there's literally nothing there. Animals have to either migrate or find some pretty interesting adaptations to survive. And that's the equator for you, In fact, this area in between these 2 points, 30 degrees to the north and 30 degrees to the south of the equator, is really this band of sunlight that we're talking about. It's known as the tropical zone because it's between the tropics of what one? Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. Yes, maybe so. What about longitude? Longitude runs north to south. Sure. 0 degrees longitude is the prime meridian. The way to remember that is 1 line of longitude is called a meridian. You guys know what prime is? What the prime is? The first, singular, the beginning meridian. So why is it there? Why is prime meridian right here? You guys know? Because it said this. Because the Greenwich England perfectly. That's where we set our time standards from. Essentially, longitude doesn't exist. There's no real physical outline. There is a physical outline for latitude because you have the equator. longitude doesn't really exist. It's not a single point on a 3D sphere, so it's kind of made up, really. And the reason for this is navigation. I don't know if you guys have ever tried navigating by longitude and latitude. You guys ever done geocaching? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? But it's not easy, is it? I mean, using a GPS, it's easier. If you're talking about going old school and using like a sextant or quadrants to try to figure it out, oh man, it's not easy. And for a long time, navigation was actually really tricky. You guys know Christopher Columbus? So you know how he actually did that, like how he figured out where he was going? He used what's called dead reckoning. Essentially, you time with an hourglass how fast you're going. The way you do that is you use what's called a chip log. You throw this thing overboard, and as it drags behind you, you count the number of knots tied on this long string. And once you stop the time, you stop the chip log, and by basically going back, you can extrapolate how many nautical miles per hour you're traveling. If you have a compass, you add these together by knowing that if you're traveling 16 miles and you're going the direction of north by northwest, then you have traveled 10 miles this way. 10 miles per hour over 1 hour is right here. That's called dead reckoning, because if you're wrong, you are dead. Because think about this, you're just going and exploring, right? This is insanity, because in the ocean are all kinds of dangers, right? I'm not just talking like man-eating sharks. I'm talking you've got hidden coral reefs that if your boat strikes it, you like shear the bottom off your boat and you sink and everyone dies. Or you've got hidden shoals. You know, you might have what's called a doldrum. That's basically parts of the ocean where there's no wind at all. And there's stories of people like getting stuck in these for months and like resorting to cannibalism to survive. Like, this was insanity. And the reason that Columbus's men almost mutinied against him and killed him wasn't because we're going to fall off the edge of the world. It was because we are running low on supplies and we don't know where we are. If we don't turn back like now, we're not going to make it home. We're going to starve to death. So you know what? We're going home, right? It just so happened they got lucky and land ho, and oh, look at all these wonderful things we can eat, like sea turtles, stuff like that. True story. Oh, they don't eat anything. You know the dodo bird? You guys know how it actually went extinct? We ate it because apparently it was delicious. I think the best chicken you've ever had in your life. Dodos are flightless, and they're really dumb animals, or were really stupid creatures. And let's face it, if you're stupid, the worst thing you can also be is delicious, right? So we ate the crap out of them, and they just disappeared. So, I mean, that's what happens, right? All right, so what is the first theme really all about? It's where something is. And there's a number of ways you can go about finding location. I think we talked about this a little yesterday, but generally speaking, you guys will use what's called relative location to describe like where you live or something like that. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had a friend like coming over to your house and like, okay, where do I go? And you're like, oh, it's easy. You turn to Krispy Kreme donuts and then you do this, and you're using landmarks to describe where they go. That's relative location. It's relative because it's in relation to or relative to something else. A more precise version, though, is absolute location. That would use things like longitude and latitude. Whenever we talk about where something is, it's helpful to know what the relation is, and that is part one why you guys have been in your house. I want you guys to have a basic understanding of where the countries of the world are. Now, I'm not going to go hugely into detail of the United States, because, I mean, you guys have probably done that before. Hell, it wouldn't be surprising if you guys had to memorize all the states and capitals at one point in your academic career. You're not going to get this class, but you do need to know relationships to different things. So, like, where certain capitals are, things like that. In addition, if you use the lines of longitude, we can get a little bit more precise. True story, a number of years ago, the final exam in this class was drawing a map by hand of the entire world. You essentially started with a blank poster board and a ruler, and had to draw in all the lines of longitude and latitude, and then you used coordinates where they overlapped with the various continents to draw it, then had to draw all the borders between all the various countries and capitals and put them all on a map. It took about 3 months to complete, and it was kind of a nightmare. So you don't have to do that. Aren't you excited? You do not have to do that. Now I will say this, at St. X, for the honors geography class, that was the final exam. Only had to do all that from memory. Yeah. You had 5 days to complete the world. So it was kind of mad. They don't do that anymore, I don't think. But the other thing we can use, of course, longitude and latitude for, other than just simply playing where something is navigating from point A to point B. Of course, this is an infamous one from Google Maps, because you've got this instruction number 12, swim across the Atlantic Ocean. But for the most part, our understanding of longitude and latitude is mostly how we use GPS receivers. By the way, you guys have a thing in your pocket that we call GPSs? Not actually GPSs. GPSs are actually the system of satellites. What you have is a GPS receiver, so you can tap into that. You know, it'd be like calling your computer the internet. It's not really true. The internet doesn't live in your computer. But you know this. You know, you guys are smart. You got that. So that's location in a nutshell. Let's talk place. Place is basically describing somewhere. What's it like there? Is it nice? That sort of thing. And generally this gives us an idea of what we can expect when studying somewhere. So I tend to roll location and place together at the same time. So you guys kind of have an understanding of where somewhere is and kind of what it's like there. Now, this, of course, is going to inform a lot of other things, such as how people live their lives and things like that. But the other thing to this is it's not just the physical land masses and not just the weather, it's also what have human beings done to change that environment. Consider this for a second. What would it be like living in Louisville, Kentucky without air conditioning? Right? Imagine during the hottest parts of the summer, you sit there dying, right? The thing is, it really is one of the hotter places in the United States. You don't quite think about it, but our humidity makes it really god-awful at certain times of the year. Without air conditioning, people would not want to live there as much as they do. And then we're not even talking about places like in Arizona or Utah or any places like that where it's actually in the freaking deserts. But people live there. Why? Because technology allows us to do so. Irrigation allows us to make golf resorts in the middle of desert. Like if you've ever looked at a map and satellite of Las Vegas, it's really weird because it's desert, desert, desert. It's green, and it's oh, there it is. You know. So it's exciting. Also, kind of weird is if you go find Disney on Google Earth, Disney World, it's really a big place. And there's even abandoned Disney parks, like, you know, used to be open, isn't anymore, and it's still there. It creeps people out because, you know, oh, it's abandoned and that means it's scary. But it's pretty neat, actually. There's actually a number of abandoned parks, amusement parks all across the world. Okay, so where is this, you think? Where is this in the world?
Australia?
Good guess, but no. Good guess. It is in the United States. Not quite. Nope. California. Hey. Good stuff. Good guess. How about here? It's also the United States. Yeah. You guys are smart. I've done this for years, and people are like, it's India. No one said that. Is it in the U.S.? They're all U.S. The United States. Nope. Alaska.
What?
It's Alaska in the spring. True story. What about there?
Utah.
They're all in the U.S. Not Utah. Kentucky.
I was gonna say.
Kentucky. It's on I-65.
Oh yeah. I've seen that before.
So what did we just notice about all these changes? I'll show you someplace you think of as being really super cold, but it's actually quite nice and verdant. And yet somewhere that you live, and it's like winter, wonderland. Yeah, right. That is because place changes, right? Changes with the seasons, changes with human environment interaction. So it's not just something that's stuck all the time, right? There are places around the world that have changed dramatically because of human environment interaction. For instance, in Persia, which is modern-day Iran, it was once very green in many different places until the Mongols came and destroyed the irrigation systems called the Khanats. So people can change a lot of stuff. Let's talk region for just a second. Region can be summarized as cultural similarities. And the fact of the matter is that region's a very interesting part of studying people, because we might seem to think that region is something maybe that it's not, and at the same time, it's pretty inclusive. Because what I find is interesting is if I say what is culture, right? Give me an example of culture. What would you say? What would you come up with? Yeah.
Like, do you want a definition or an example?
Well, just give me an example.
Like the type of food someone eats.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Type of music. And
Music.
hair.
Okay. Yeah. Music. All right. What else? Sorry. What? Yes. Sorry. I don't know what you have to say. Yeah. What are you gonna say close to? Aww. Anything else? Housing. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Sure. One thing is religion is another, yeah. And the other thing is like there's certain parts of the way people think, right? It's a method of way we view life and we view certain things. It gets pretty deep at times. And so when we talk about region, we try to lump areas in the world that are similar culturally. One example of this is the Middle East, right? Now, if I was to show you a map of the Middle East, where would it be located? Yeah. Oh,
Right there.
Right
That.
there on that.
Just imagine.
Here. I got it. I'll put down my map and you can point it. Where's it? Okay, so here's Lebanon.
Yeah, like right there. Right
There?
there. Like,
How far does it go?
it goes down. No, right. To the right. Down.
To the left.
Down.
Down.
Yeah, there you go.
Here's the Middle East, right? So you're kind of right, but also kind of wrong. Right, it's all good. It's all good. It's actually almost all of northern Africa, all the way to Morocco. Morocco, which is on the west coast of Africa, is part of the Middle East. Pakistan is not. Pakistan is actually closer in culture to India than it is to the Middle East. Which makes people really weirded out. Like, what? It's like culture is very distinctly different. So what's the number one religion practiced in the Middle East? It is Islam, but that's another big one. The three main monotheistic faiths, of course, are pretty big there. But Islam is the number one. What's the most commonly spoken language in the Middle East? Arabic? No. And then, what about foods? What foods are common in the Middle East? You said ices?
No.
That'd be delicious. Truthfully, it has a lot of similarities to Greek food. It's actually Mediterranean. If you think about it, most of this is along the Mediterranean coast. So a lot of the same type of foods appear in these different areas. Of course, there's also differences as well. But the point is all these are various similarities that we would kind of lump together. Interesting question. Is the United States a region? Are we culturally similar? It's kind of a trickier question to answer. In some cases, well, yeah, kind of, because we're all American, we have that identity, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Recently, a little more connected than
Yeah, I can see that difference. One thing you'll notice is the United States' viewpoint on immigration is different than other places. Like, for instance, let's take Canada, since that's the next section we're looking at. In the United States, we have this attitude that we're a melting pot, right? What that means is different cultures come here, and while they might still practice some of their cultural traditions, over time, as they have families and those children grow up in America, they lose a lot of that. And we take cultural practices from people that we like and make them American, right? Like one of the things I think is kind of interesting, let's talk fried rice for a second. You know, fried rice that you get at like a Chinese restaurant or whatever, something like that. That's really kind of American. It's actually a tradition throughout many East Asian cultures, where essentially you take rice that's kind of going old and gross, and you throw it in a pot with a bunch of other crap you find your leftover stored food, right? And you mix it all together before it goes too bad to eat, you just kind of eat it. So what happened is, when Chinese immigrants came to the United States, they set up restaurants, and they would take leftover food, throw it together, fried rice, set it out on a table, so like a bowl of chips if you go to like a Mexican restaurant, and people would eat it, and then you order your food, and that was that. When people started asking, I want some more of that fried rice, they're like, really? Okay, and they would mix it up, and it sort of changed. Like if you, for instance, eat in a Chinese restaurant, like it's actually, China, it's very different than our understanding of Chinese food. To put it one way that might also be understandable, it'd be like saying that, McDonald's is like what Americans eat every day, which is not true at all, right? Or KFC for that matter. So it is something that's been adapted to the tastes of the region in which it develops. That makes sense. Now Canada's different. Canada actually has this idea of multiculturalism where they sort of encourage everyone to hang on to their traditions and be unique, but they don't tend to blend. So like if you look at the cultures and the races and the ethnicities throughout Canada, it's like little areas dotted around Canada. So it's almost like a mosaic as opposed to a melting pot. So it's a little bit different. But it's also interesting because like in the province of Vancouver, which is the Northwest, they have like the highest concentration of Chinese outside of China in the world. That was largely due to the communist takeover. And there's like the oldest Buddhist temple in North America. So, anyways. Regions funny like that. You could debate it, but it's kind of an interesting discussion. Next up, human-environment interaction. Essentially, our relationship with the Earth. Understand this. We influence our environment, yeah? What are some ways we influence our environment? Sure. What else? Yeah.
Breeding the animals to make them more delicious.
True. We definitely influence in that. That's a process called artificial selection. If you look at dogs, for instance, dogs are freaking wolves. Yet it's kind of hard to think of a Chihuahua as being a fierce animal, right? I mean, animals that we wrote horror stories about to scare little children into doing what we told them to do. If you think about it, look at old fairy tales. A lot of times they have wolves that eat kids. That's because wolves are freaking dangerous, right? Chihuahua, the most it's going to do is gum you. We'll try to bite you, we just kind of step on them a little bit. It's all good. We made them that way. We bred them that way because we had certain traits we wanted. We did that with all kinds of different breeds of animals. Some we made for companionship, some we made because they're delicious, and some we did to work as work animals. I'm not talking about dogs necessarily. I'm saying all kinds of different animals. Think, for instance, of like Kobe beef, which Kobe cows are given daily massages and beers because what it does is as they massage, the fat develops inside the muscle. So when you cook it, it's so moist and delicious. It's the best beef in the world. It's really expensive. And then, of course, things like chickens that grow so large within 5 weeks, their weight is so large that they'll break their legs. So you gotta butcher them before they get that big. So, yeah, like most chickens you buy in the supermarket, they're butchered within 5 weeks of being hatched. True story. The whole idea of laying things, well, that's why they're designed that way. Other chickens are bred to lay eggs, and they lay eggs like every day. And some are kind of bred somewhere in the middle there. So, most people don't raise their own meat in the United States anymore. We've developed a specialized society for the purpose of making certain there's more than enough for everybody. That's kind of increasing production. But it also means that there's some really kind of harsh realities about farming that we're kind of removed from. I mean, the thing it is, if you eat meat, an animal's dying for that to happen, you know? And we're so far removed for it, like, people didn't realize how to do it. True story, right? I have chickens. Is one of the reasons I kind of somewhat knowledgeable on the subject. And, you know, one of the things that you have to come to the conclusion of is what do you do when they stop laying? Some people are like, it's my pet chicken, I'm going to have pet chickens. I don't have pet chickens, I don't have nannies. I have livestock. And whenever they stop laying, they get the axe. But then I realized I had no idea how to actually go about that. So what do you do when you don't know how to do something? You look it up on YouTube. And sure enough, there are videos all over the place of how to butcher chickens. So, what's that?
Do you like butcher them, skin them, make butcher them, eat them?
That's the idea.
At night?
What's that?
Do you like?
No, you don't eat them that night because the reason is like a chicken will continue to lay for 6-8 years, right? So by the time you get around to actually eating them, they're kind of tough and not really the nicest meat. So there's a couple ways you can cook them. The easiest way is you let them sit for a couple days, 3 days in like a brine, and then you roast them, so like a turkey. There's also a recipe that's French called coq au vin, which actually was rooster, but same basic idea, where you cook it with a red wine sauce. It's really delicious, all this kind of stuff. So basically, people have been doing this for years, right? But we don't because of specialization, if that makes sense. So it's just, again, human-environment interaction is something that goes both ways. It's not just us influencing our environment, we're influenced right back by it. If you think about it, everything we have, unless it's made in the lab, is natural. So how we go about living our lives is influenced by the environment, which is why people are really concerned whenever you have environmental like disasters, like oil in the people's drinking water causing cancer. You know, it's because we're influenced right back. Furthermore, our cultures develop because of what's around us. Like if you look at food in particular, the food we eat was really dependent upon what grows in that area. Now, granted, nowadays our technology allows us to have freaking oranges in the middle of January, but whatever. You know, I mean, we can do all kinds of zany things. One of the things I think is really neat, they have a thing in these arborist magazines called fruit salad trees. It's a tree that can grow like 5 different kinds of apples, plus a bunch of different berries and things like that, because they've been grafted onto it. So it's very weird, but at the same time, totally kind of neat at the same time. But that's human-environment interaction. Of course, a lot of times we talk about pollution being an example, but also the types of houses we live in, you know? Not that people really live in igloos. That's just, you know, something people think about. That's a survival shelter. People do that out of necessity, not because, hey, let's live in ice. Although I will say I have a friend who's from Toronto in Canada. Oh, he has so much fun with people talking about igloos and how everyone in Canada lives in igloos. And there's this big running joke from Canada called the Great Canadian Wallpaper Festival. It's supposedly that whenever the spring comes around and all the igloos start to melt, everybody pulls out their wallpaper out of their igloos and hangs it up to dry on clotheslines. And so everyone can see everybody else's wallpaper and like maybe make trades. So this sort of thing happens, and it's a big celebration. And this joke got so big that somebody made a website all about the Great Canadian Wallpaper Festival and took fake photos and like aged some of them. It was hilarious. I don't think it's still up anymore, but it was great. It was one of the greatest trolls in internet history. Anyways. But also the food we eat, things like that. Most people I find when I think of Japanese food think this. That's not Japanese food. I mean, it is, but it's saying that is all of Japanese food is, again, kind of equivalent to saying KFC is all there is to American food. It's just not true. It's a gross over-exaggeration. And actually, a friend of mine who's Japanese told me there's actually 6 or 7 different kinds of sushi cooking. So, like, even saying it's sushi is that's really kind of grossly overestimated, you know. So, you know, most people's reaction to Japanese food, I find, when they consume most of the ramen noodles. But that's basically junk food.
Yeah.
You know, it's like eating Pringles and being like, I'm going to survive on this. You can, but you're going to probably get, you know, all kinds of diseases and you're going to have scurvy. So don't do that. Now, kind of more interesting in terms of living, this is what's called a yurt or a ger. It's a Mongolian tent. And basically, if you look at Mongolia, it's a big grasslands called steppes. It's the steppe lands in basically the northern part of, well, just north of China, really, but the kind of central part of Asia. And the thing is, grass isn't really good for supporting human life because, you know, we can't eat it. But it's really great if you herd animals, which is what the Mongolians did. But when you're herding, you have to let the animals graze, and then when they eat all the grass down, you move them along to the next area. So everything you have has to be portable. And this is a lifestyle that's been around for centuries. What's kind of neat, though, is that this is what it looks like on the outside, this is what it looks like on the inside. And you may notice there's a laptop computer with a printer and a modem. They've got TV, refrigerators. It's modern living, right? But they're in the freaking middle of nowhere. They still ride horses and they still live in a very traditional way, but technology has allowed them to still remain connected. So there's this greater aspect of culture being perpetuated through technology. Okay, so lastly, movement, the effects of diffusion. Essentially, culture and people and ideas and diseases and all these types of things have moved around the world for centuries, and they've been adapted in different places and taken over, and technology and all these different things have allowed us to experience culture that we normally wouldn't. I mean, think about it. You live in an amazing time today. You can go get food from pretty much anywhere in the world by setting some reservations at 7 a.m. You can go around the world. Ethiopian, not a problem. Vietnamese, no problem. I mean, all kinds of stuff out there. And music, with Spotify and services like that, you can hear music from artists who are not really that well known all over the world. It's an amazing thing that movement has just been really made even easier with technology. Of course, McDonald's is an example of something that we've spread across the world, for better or for worse. But the other thing is movies, Star Wars, you know. It's one of these things that it's an export, but at the same time, we've imported different cultural traditions as well. And to this day, the world is a shrinking place. I mean, not physically, obviously, but the thing of it is, technology allows us to reach out and communicate in ways that was never really possible before. My dad likes to play backgammon a whole lot, so he does so on Yahoo, and he actually plays a lot with people in Turkey. It's like one of their national pastimes is backgammon. So, you know, he ends up chatting with someone halfway across the freaking world every day because he's bored and wants to play a game. That's what happens when you retire, I guess. But it's one of those types of things that, you know, it gives us a lot of really interesting opportunities. Now, I didn't go through with it because I lost track of this person, but at one point I was looking at having you guys doing a project, a cultural exchange online with a class that lived in the northern part of Scotland. Now, it didn't pan out because essentially it was hard to kind of nail everything down, but it was, you know, it was totally possible. It's just, this is the world you guys live in, you know. One of my friends, his job, his team that works on this IT program with him, one of the guys lives in England and the other lives in Bangkok. You know, these are his co-workers. They live halfway across the world. All right, guys, you take care. I'll see you later. And that's it for today. That was the last slide, so you guys are caught up.